Okay, great. So just a quick note, we're going to use the kind of following key terms. You'll see them replicated in our guidance and our application forms, but we can use language interchangeably. So we just want to make sure everyone is aware. VCS, it stands for Voluntary Community Sector. Many of you will be very familiar with that, and you're probably from that sector. Organisation or group, we might use that interchangeably, and that just refers to voluntary and community sector organisations. However, we do sometimes use the word structured group of residents, and that is a different term, but that's really only used in community chest, because in that fund we allow just exactly that, structured groups of residents, people who live on the same street, who want to get together and do something. We enable those kind of groups to put in applications to community chest because it's very small amounts of money. So you won't hear that today, but it's just something to be aware of. Grant agreement. So this is what every successful applicant will get from us. It is the legally binding agreement that all organisations signed in order for funds to be released, and that contains schedules. It contains terms and conditions, and that's just something to be aware of. And then requests. So we might say request for funding. You'll see request on our webpage and on our on our application portal, but that is just used interchangeably with project or application. All of that is just what it is that you're applying for funding for. So a quick introduction to the team. As I said, I'm Caitlin. I'm the Interim Grants and Investment Manager, covering for Lisa, who's on maternity leave. We also have in our team Sue, a Strategic Delivery Officer, and Claire, a Strategic Lead. I think that Tom is on the call, so I'll hand over to Tom to introduce himself, to hand over to Moyo. But essentially, we are the people that are responsible for all aspects of delivery of the grants program, including that end-to-end, so program design, applications, assessment, contracting, payments. And then everyone who gets a grant from us is assigned a specific grants officer, and that person kind of guides them through everything that they need to know, from setting up the project, signing grant agreements, doing monitoring, doing visits, and evaluating and reviewing their grants at the end. So Tom, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself?
Hi, Caitlin, thanks. I'm Tom Shaw. I'm the Senior Grants Investment Officer, and I oversee the children and young people strand of our project grants, which had a session on earlier this week. Over to you, Moyo.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Moyo Adeneye, and I'm a Grants and Investment Officer in the Grants team, and I oversee this project, the project, the delivery of this project, so I oversee this. I'll go on and I'll continue to talk you through our program priorities now. We have two program priorities that underpin the whole grants program. These have been updated to reflect the new strategic plan of the council. For our project grants, we are also looking for grants that support the following 6 equality aims. These were developed last year as part of the Children and Young People's Program. There are 6, like I said, They are identity and belonging, being healthy, making a positive contribution, achieving economic and financial well-being, enjoying and achieving, and being safe. Next slide, please. Thank you, Caitlin. The table on the screen, this gives an overview of the grants programs open for application this year. This will be discussed in further detail shortly. But in terms of an overview, we will have a project grants program. This is the program we are talking about now, which has separate strands for Children and Young People's Fund as at last year. You can apply for funds of up to 20,000 for this. As with last year's program, organization will have to have an annual income between 10,000 to £10,000 to 1 million in order to apply for this grant. There will be one round of funding, and this opened on the 5th of February with grants awarded from April 2024. Our community chairs program will remain similar to previous years, and we continue to have 4 rounds of funding. Organization must have an income of less than £10,000 to apply. This is so that we have focused on ensuring that the community chairs grants reach the grassroots groups who the funding is intending to support. So the community chairs program is intending to support small community organizations. There will continue to be a heavy Hackney element of community chairs grants as at last year. Thank you. I'll go on to talk about our eligibility criteria. Our eligibility criteria is as follows. Organization must be not-for-profit. Organization must also be value-driven and principally reinvest their surpluses to further social, environmental, or cultural objectives. These are typically organizations such as registered charity or charitable incorporated organizations, charitable companies, companies limited by guarantee, social enterprises, and community interest companies. Private businesses and individuals are not eligible to apply for grants funding from this program. At least 80% of the people benefiting from the funding request must be Hackney residents. Applications must apply with the program guidance for the scheme they are applying for, including start and end dates and annual income criteria. If applicants who have received a grant through this program in previous years have failed to fulfill the funding requirements of the previous grants, including return of required monitoring forms, they may not be eligible to apply for a grant. Over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Moyo. And it's also a good time, just in case anyone hasn't read that guidance, and we will go through kind of the timeline of applications to the project grants. But it's just worth noting that for project grants, you can apply for a grant to be delivered over 2 years. And for CYP grants, that's 1 year. So when I go through the slides later on the kind of when your grant can start and end by, I'll go through that in a bit more detail. But just to give that context now, that what we're talking about for project grants can be projects delivered over 2 years. So in terms of eligibility, just in addition to that general eligibility that Moyo's just outlined, what organisations also need to do is provide us with a number of documents in their application that are used for us to conduct due diligence checks. And essentially, the purpose of that at this stage is for us to know that you're eligible. So in order to do that, what we ask people to upload to their application is a constitution or essentially just a registration number so that we can then go and check on Charities Commission or Companies House, depending on how you're registered. And we do that because it's part of our eligibility criteria that organisations are registered and that they have clearly defined aims and objectives and that they're principally non-for-profit. What people also have to do is upload a bank statement. And this is because in order to receive a grant from us, you need to have an organisational bank account. Where this might not apply is for structured groups of residents, but we won't go into that here. And that's really also an important fraud prevention measure. And when we come across fraudulent grants at an application stage, we usually find them through our bank statements that are clearly not bank statements or are forged bank statements. So that's why we ask for that. What we also ask is for annual accounts or a financial projection. This just enables us to get a kind of overview of how your organisation operates financially and what that annual income looks like. As for smaller groups who may not have this, or maybe they're quite new, what we also accept are like financial forecasts or projections. What we also ask to see at this stage is appropriate safeguarding and insurance policies. And that's just so we know that you have them. If, for example, you have an insurance policy that just unluckily expires right before you want your project to start or right before one of our kind of, deadlines, that's okay. Just still upload the one that is eligible now, but will expire. And if you are successful for a grant, we'll just make sure that we have some process in place so that when you get your new one, you can submit that to us. And what you also have to do to be eligible, but this is just captured through the application form, is just demonstrate to us at some point in time, usually just through telling us that 80% of your beneficiaries are Hackney residents. Because of course, as a place-based funder, this is a key part of our eligibility criteria. So in terms of what's not eligible to be funded, so we have a very wide scope of eligibility, as we've kind of just gone through. We don't have anything that we won't, that we are absolutely wanting to fund, and that's to capture the breadth of the voluntary community sector in Hackney and acknowledge that in this project grant scheme, it is for generic projects. But what we do have is some things that we actually just can't fund, usually just for legal or financial reasons. So I won't go through these all, but just the couple that tend to be most applicable to people looking to apply are acknowledging that we don't fund political or exclusively religious activities, but absolutely, of course, we are more than happy to fund religious groups who do fantastic work in our community. What we can't fund, the second point here, this overheads allocated or at apportioned rates materially in excess of those used in similar work. That is a very complicated and unfortunately just a legal way of saying that for overheads or core costs, they have to be proportionate to the project you're applying for. This isn't primarily a core funding program. So the take home from that is it's absolutely totally fine to put in things like, rent, staff costs, those kind of core costs. However, they need to be proportionate to the project that you're asking to deliver. It's also good to note that we can't fund significant capital or building costs, and that's just because this funding, comes from a revenue-based source. It doesn't come from a capital-based source, and those two have legal. So capital funding has to be legally distributed in a different way. And what that means for you is that if you have a project to refurbish, a cafeteria or a building, that this isn't the right scheme for you. But let's say as a part of a project you're delivering, you have, you want to purchase small white goods or, a fridge or maybe a new bench. That is totally fine. Just keep it proportionate. And then the last one I'll talk about is this bottom one, and that is any costs that are not outlined within the grant application. And that's just our way of saying that, again, this isn't core funding generally. This is project-based restricted funding. So if you want something to be funded by our scheme, it's got to go in that grant application, the budget section, which we'll go through, and then we agree on that in a grant application. I think the other one that I will just note that I've forgotten here is there's one in here. Let's see. Oh yeah, cost paid or liabilities incurred before the start date. Essentially, another complicated way of saying that we don't fund retrospective costs. So all of the costs that you apply for, they have to be after the 1st of April 2024. And that's just our way of saying we're not funding things that you've already paid for, that you've already delivered. We're funding things that you request to us to deliver in the future after the 1st of April. But any questions around that, just chuck them in the chat. We're always happy to clarify. Just a quick note on contingency funding. So when the cost of living crisis kind of came around, what we did was embed a small amount of contingency funding allowance into our grants program. And this is for any organisations applying for a grant of over 12 months. So if you do want to deliver a 12 or 13, 18 or 24-month project, you can include a contingency budget. It must be clearly identified in terms of the amount that you're including and what this might be used for. And obviously this budget has to be in the maximum allowance of our grants, so that's £20,000. And really it's just for items related to this specific grant, not general organisational costs. And that's just to acknowledge that the cost of things may fluctuate. I suppose I won't go through them all, but it's just to note that if you have unspent contingency budget, along with any underspend from your grant generally. So when we give you a grant, your grant officer will work with you constantly to say, spend your grant because you don't want to give it back to us. We don't want to take it. We want that money to stay in the community. But anything that remains unspent, we do claw back, and that's so we can put it in the pot and fund it next, in the coming years for other organisations. So we have a very competitive fund. So I think I'm handing over to Moya with this one.
Thank you, Katie. Just to let you know, we receive a lot of high quality application each year, and unfortunately, we cannot fund everything. The assessment process looks at applications comparatively and takes into account areas of key need in terms of geography and beneficiary groups. The application form we ask you to choose key beneficiary groups along with information about protected characteristics. We appreciate that every individual is unique and experiences various levels of intersectionality. To mitigate this, we ask in the application that you describe your beneficiary group and why you are best placed to deliver your service to them. With all applications, we try to prioritize organizations who are led by people with lived experience of the issues or have an active commitment of involving beneficiaries in the design and delivery of their services. We have tweaked our beneficiary groups from last year to better reflect the key needs across Hackney. These are general across the whole grant scheme, but you will see that some will be taken out depending on the specific programs. For example, for project grants, it will not be relevant for a key beneficiary groups to be children under 25 years because this is for CYP, our children's program. Our key beneficiary groups are listed here, if you see on the screen, and in our guidance, and are included in our guidance documents. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks, Moya. And I suppose just to elaborate on what Moya said there about prioritising equity-led organisations, I think if you came to our launch, you may have seen it, but from memory, so last year in our 2023-2024 programme, 2/3 of all of the people that went on to deliver grants for us and be awarded were from equity-led organisations, so organisations that are buying for. We had a similar statistic for very small organisations, I think, under £500,000. And that is an increase from our 2022, 2023. So we think that we are on the right track with ensuring that the people who, are funded and that deliver groups, especially to these primary beneficiaries, are really well placed and representative of those communities. This is just a quick overview of the application process, the journey that it will go on. I won't go through this in too much detail, but essentially planning, that's the first step. Use our guidance documents. You're here now. You're looking at that application. We have a very long application window. It is about 49 days. And that is really just from feedback from organisations that, they have a lot on their plate. They need as long as a time possible to apply. Then in advance of the deadline, make sure you submit your application through our grants portal. We can't accept applications in any other way, but if you have any accessibility requirements for that grants portal, just email us, with as much time as possible, and we'll be happy to help, sort those out. What we then do after we receive your application is we conduct those due diligence checks that I spoke about. And that's an important step, and it's why we ask at that application stage that you give us those documents. One is so that potentially your eligible application is not being assessed against an ineligible application. That's an important one. Then potentially an ineligible application is funded. We then do due diligence after they're not fundable. It kind of causes a chain effect. The second is that sometimes people make errors in their application forms that really we only catch through that initial due diligence screen. So it might be selecting the wrong type of, organisation type. It might be kind of getting the dates wrong. It might be putting, we want 10 quid instead of 1,000 quid to deliver this project. And all of those things could make your application ineligible. So by screening at this point in time, we're able to go back to you and say, we think there might be an error and it may make you ineligible. Can you just let us know if this is an error? If it is, we'll update you, we'll progress the application forward. If it's not, we can tell you now that you're not eligible, So that's why we do that there. Then what happens is volunteers from across the council and the local voluntary and community sector, at least 2 people look at your application and they score it in line with the scoring criteria that we're going to go through later. What those people do is they score it individually, they come together, they discuss, they moderate, they give feedback, they make recommendations. And then those recommendations are taken to a grants panel where everyone, convenes and makes those final funding decisions. Throughout that assessment process and right up until after the panel, we will ask clarifying questions if there are things that we're not sure about. It's not our policy to move forward and make funding decisions where there might be, if I just knew this, I would if I knew this piece of information, it'd be the difference between funding or not funding the application. So we do go back to clarifying questions. So please do just make sure that you're looking out in your inbox, for if we come back to you. And just to note that for our Orthodox Jewish community and those organisations that might be on the call today, we're aware that Passover starts on the 22nd of April. So we'll make sure that we come with clarifying questions prior to that period, so that you have, the time to be able to look at those and you won't be away on holidays. In terms of the next steps, everyone who submits an application to us receives their outcome, either successful or unsuccessful. If you are unsuccessful, what we do, or what we give to everyone, is kind of the blanket feedback that we've seen throughout the assessment and panel process, and put that in a PDF and we send it through. But you should note that every unsuccessful applicant is able to get bespoke feedback on their application. Just flick us an email. We'll put this in our emails, obviously. And then what we do is we set up a phone call or a Zoom call, and we will take you through what the individual feedback was on your application. Successful applicants, they then receive a conditional notification letter. We might say, this your insurance policy, has now expired. Do you have a new one? Can you send it through to us? Or that, plus the grant agreement. And so then we just progress it forward. In terms of an overview of dates, so this table, it outlines the deadline. And so that applications must be submitted. It's actually the 25th of March. Sorry, I'm not sure why it says 27th on there, but it's the 25th of March at 5 p.m. We can't accept late applications, unfortunately, because we get hundreds of applications and it's not fair to accept late ones. So just make sure that you factor in any potential technical difficulties or anything that might stop you from submitting that application before 5 p.m. on the 25th of March. This is for projects, as I said, that they start between the 1st of April and the 1st of sorry, I don't think these dates are correct here. We'll come back to you, but essentially, so we run through the financial year. So your applications have to, so your project applications, then you've got to, sorry, these dates have thrown me off. What we do, so you've got to put your application in, and the project has to start from the 1st of April 2024. And then it has to start somewhere, within that financial year, but it can go for up to 2 years. So you essentially choose when you want your project to start within the financial year and how long you want it to go for. As long as it finishes within 2 years of that start date, it's completely fine. When we send out the email with the slides, we'll update this, and we'll also put a little bit of, a clarification disclaimer on there. We then have our clarifying question stage, which is around the same dates. So it's in there in that mid-April period, of course, before Passover for Orthodox Jewish organizations. And then we have, we'll make sure that applicants are notified no later than the first week of May. So when you're ready to apply, essentially, as I said, you just have to submit via our grants application portal. You can do this through our website, or you can do it via the link. It's important to note that on our website, when you click apply now, it's going to generate you a new application form. So if you've already started that application form, one of two things will happen. One is that you can access that application form through an email that you get sent. So every time you complete your application form online, you press save, you get sent a copy to your inbox, which is of your progress. So you can access it directly through there, or on our website. Instead of ticking apply now, you can click continue your application, and that will take you into your grants portal. So obviously, if you haven't ever applied before, you just set up a login. You can save your progress as you go. But we find that some people have, errors or issues online, with saving their progress. I think it depends on what browser and your kind of internet speed. So it's pretty much always good practice to complete a Word, do your answers in a Word document. And obviously in our guidance, we have step-by-step question. We've got the step-by-step questions there. So you can always just download a copy of that document and put your answers in there. We don't have mandatory word counts. We just have guides. We used to have mandatory word counts, but people fed back to us that they felt it limited the amount that they were able to say. So instead we said, this is our kind of guide. It might be 300 words, might be 500 words for a particular section, but actually you can put as many words as you want. Just remember though that assessors are looking at lots of applications. So it's always a good policy to keep it clear, concise, short, use bullets wherever you feel that, that's preferred. And yeah. Moyo.
Thank you, Katie. What follows are the questions you'll be asked as part of your application form, what we are looking for from you, and of some questions. And for some questions, how assessors will mark them. Section 1 of the application is details about your organization. This session is not scored at all, but a clear answer will give assessors a good grasp of who you are as an organization. This question gives an idea to assessors as to what your organization does and the focus of your organization. This should be a short answer to give a clear overview of what you do. You can go into more detail about why you are best placed to deliver your project later on in the application. We ask that all staff that are working on your project, they are paid the London living wage. This section is to know organizations who are led by people with lived experience of the issue their beneficiaries face. Question 1.8 now. This question allows you to expand on question 1.8, this question 1.9. We aim to prioritize organizations who are led by people with lived experience of the issues their beneficiaries face. We mentioned this before, Caitlin mentioned it. Where this is not possible, we want organizations to show that they have an active commitment to involving beneficiaries in the design and delivery of their services. Thank you. Question 1.9 and 1.10 are not marked, but they are useful for assessors to get a good understanding of what your organization or partnership does and how this relates to your proposal put forward later on in the application. I hand over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks, Moyo. So this is section 2. So this is when we start to get into a scored section. And section 2 is the most important part of an application because it's when you tell us what you want funding for. It's important to note that we don't mark or make scores on an application spelling or grammar. What's important is that we can understand what it is that you're saying. So be clear, use bullet points wherever you want. And what we recommend is if you're new to applications in general, ask someone who has little knowledge of your project to read through it and see if they understand what it is you want to do. That's literally the exact perspective of assessors. Note that we are proportionate in our assessments. That means that if you are asking for £10,000, your application will be assessed in proportion to that amount, as opposed to if you're asking for £20,000, where we would obviously expect a bit more detail. For this section and others, as I said, we've removed word counts, but just keep it clear and concise. So your project summary, this is the title of your project. This is how you kind of want people to refer to your project, how you'd be comfortable with someone else marketing your project, and kind of is fundamentally in no more than 50 words, what that kind of core description of your project is. What we also ask is where the project will be delivered, and we have a drop-down list of wards in the borough. And then we've got our start and end dates. So remember that your project, it can't last more than 24 months, and it's got to start in this 2024-2025 financial year. So 1st of April this year to the 31st of March next year. And I guess it's important to note, if you're a smaller organisation who, for whatever reason, to start this project, you need this funding, make sure you think about that when it comes to our dates. So if we're going to be able to let people know that we've made funding decisions in that first week of May, and you absolutely wouldn't be able to start this project financially until you have that money, it's important to consider that probably your start date, should be maybe, late May. That might not apply for some organizations who, let's say, maybe scaling an existing project or continuing something, that they've previously done, or who have money to deliver this project, but ours would kind of be that supplemental. So section 2.4, this is where we start to get into the really important, assessable parts of our application. Here, what you're asked to do is choose, one of those 2 grants priorities that your project is working towards, that we outlined at the start of the session. And then you kind of frame your project description. So what it is that you want to do, how you want to do it, how you're going to deliver it, why you want to do it. So all the good parts of a project description, you just kind of frame them in the lens of our priorities as a funder. So in terms of this question, there's a lot to cover. So what we do is we just say, maybe think about breaking it down into the bullets below. So that is what the project will achieve and how that fits in with our priority, how you'll achieve this. So literally, kind of the nuts and bolts of it, and how you'll specifically deliver that. Who will benefit from the project is really important. Of course, we've got the beneficiary section, so you might leave, a fair bit of that there. But, if you're targeting a specific group of people or a particular area, it's good in this bit to say why. And then, why the project is needed. Why do you want to deliver this? Why do you need funding for this? And I guess really why your group is best placed to deliver it. And if you are targeting a specific group, it is always good, if you haven't already, to say why this particular group really, really would benefit from this project. So I guess one of our top tips there is, this is a question that causes a lot of kind of confusion with assessors when key parts of this are missing. So if an assessor doesn't understand what your project is after reading this question, it's probably not a very good answer. Make sure that you spend time on this question. And a strong answer clearly links between the project and the program priorities. So a waffly or a vague answer might suggest to us that you haven't really considered your project in line with the aims of what we're looking for, which is obviously something that, can naturally happen in a world where everyone needs funding and there's funding pots available. You want to deliver your project, and you're kind of working your project to suit your funder aims. So just make sure that you're being really clear around how that meets our priorities. So these are just some examples. I won't go through them, but they're just good to look at, and they're in your guidance document, I believe. I suppose the only thing that we will say on this is some projects may feel that they contribute to both of these priorities. Similarly with the equality aims, you might, rightly so, think our project really hits like a bunch of these things. And that's fine, and you can reference this in your answer, but just do keep in mind that in our experience with these applications and what gets funded, it is much better to align with one strongly and one clearly. You don't have to do both. Than it is to try and cover everything and say, you know, our project will do everything, or will meet both of these in many ways, a bit more weakly. So, you know, yeah, if you can, aim for one and be really, really strong in why your project meets that one priority. And so this is how assessors are looking at your answer. All of our scoring criteria is linked in our guidance document. And that's so that as you're writing, hopefully you have everything that you need to see what assessors are looking for from your answer. So a very good answer in this section is clear on all of those key elements. And that'll look different for every project, and assessors know that. But it gives a good understanding of what the project is. They're not confused about what's being delivered, who those beneficiaries are, what the need is, how they know this, so how you kind of come to that conclusion. That might just be through your community work. Just say that, that's great. You don't need to leverage in lots of stats and evidence if you don't have it. Why your organization would do a really good job delivering it. And so again, this very good answer shows the link between the project and the priorities and how it positively contributes to those. So this 2.5 is also a key question. And that's where we have that kind of on the first little logic flow that we showed at the start of the presentation. We have that program priorities. This is fundamentally at a program level what we're hoping projects will align to. But then we've got our aims and our outcomes. So you're asked to choose which of these equality outcomes your project best aligns with, and then you're asked to describe how your project will work towards this, what success might look like to you, and how you're going to demonstrate that. You know, what's your plan in that regard? So some projects, like I said, they might be like, you know, we can contribute to all of these. But yeah, one is better, one stronger. The only thing I'll elaborate on is we have slightly updated the definition for being safe in our guidance. And that's because we didn't get a lot of applications last year. This is really for things that are, you know, preventative approaches that support people, whoever they are, to make safe choices and, you know, maybe to prevent from antisocial behavior, to think about their safety and their well-being psychologically, online, physically. So just to clarify kind of what we see being safe as meaning. But I should caveat for this, for anything that we're talking about today, whether it's a question of I'm not sure if we're eligible, or I'm not sure if this expense is something I should be included, email us, send us an email, say I've read your guidance, I'm not sure if I'm eligible in this regard, you know, here's some of my documents that make it seem, you know, here's my, you know, a constitution, here's this, here's that. And we can actually respond to you with like bespoke feedback of, we've read these documents, it looks like you're totally eligible, or, you know, we can really do that. So if you do have any very, very specific organizational project-based questions, never hesitate to email us about them. So these are those equality aims in detail. So again, I won't go through them too much. I can give some examples. So being healthy, that might look like, I think last year we had a free hip hop dance activity taking place within community settings run by, you know, community leaders. For achieving economic and financial well-being, we had a project that aimed to create more employment opportunities for young people who were currently using an adventure playground. Or we had, I think, one where, you know, supporting young people locally to kickstart their career in tech. So again, you know, that being safe, where people are supported to develop their knowledge and skills around managing risk, making safe choices, whatever that safety looks like to you in your organizational context. A very good answer in this section is that outcomes chosen are clearly aligned with the project that is being requested. They seem appropriate and achievable given the project activities. And that's a really good one, you know. Try not to overpromise, try not to go from 0 to 100 or aim for the stars, what we're looking for is appropriateness, achievability, realisticness. We are aware that £20,000 is not a huge pot of money, and we don't expect, the world from that. And that's something that we like to consider in our scoring. And yeah, how they will work towards their outcomes is, again, it's realistic, it's appropriate, it's within the skill set of their, the people that they've said are going to deliver, and it's not overly burdensome on them or the service users. And again, clearly outlining what success looks like. So if this project is a rip-roaring success, we'll kind of see this, we'll know this, we'll probably do this in the future. And ideally, kind of what tools you'll use to measure, or if measurement is not appropriate, to demonstrate. So, thinking about what that looks like specifically for your project and just being clear about that. So Moya, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Katie. Showing on the screen is question 2.6. Question 2.6 is asking you about how your project will be run, how it will be managed. You must make sure that you provide relevant background experience of your organization and staff. You discuss all elements of your project planning and delivery, including planning, delivery, including planning, delivery, and the evaluation of the project. It often helps to go through the project step by step so assessors can get a comprehensive picture of your project. Very good answers will be very clear on how the project will be managed, who will be involved, and what relevant skills and experience they will bring. Thank you. As we have mentioned from previous questions, we want organizations to show they have an active commitment to involving beneficiaries in the design and delivery of their services. In this question, we are looking for you to demonstrate how your beneficiaries shape and guide your projects. Good answers will show how beneficiaries are involved in every stage of the project, including planning, like I said before, delivery, and evaluation. Good answers will also show how feedback is taken and used to shape ongoing or future projects. The top tip that we can give you is that give examples of how your projects have been involved in your previous projects. How your beneficiaries have been involved in your previous projects, if you have it. And this will show your experience in this area. A very good answer will clearly show how and why the project's beneficiaries are involved at every stage and how their input shapes the project. Never be subtle or imply things about risks. Yes, thank you. Always be very explicit and talk about it is about risk now. If your project is working with people, I mean people of vulnerable people, you should always be referencing safeguarding in your risk section. All projects, large and small, present risks. In this session, you are expected to complete a risk assessment, clearly outlining what risk may occur and how this will be mitigated. A good application will clearly identify any relevant risk and assess the probability of this happening and the impact of it on the project. Then articulate how this will be mitigated in practice. This will look different from every project, and is assessed by assessors for comprehensiveness. Don't shy away from using bullet points. Being to the point, virtual and clear about things like risk and project management will help you submit a more readable application. Remember that assessors look at many applications. Using bullets or simple plain language that is to the point will clearly help. A very good answer will clearly acknowledge the main risks and have a clear and appropriate response for each one. Yes, thank you. Section 3 is all about your beneficiaries. This is the type of people you would like to support. You like to support through your project. Only one part of this session is covered, but make sure your answers align with what you have told us about your project. So if you have told us your project is specifically targeting people age 85 plus, but then click multiple age groups in this session, assessors may be confused. If you are targeting group based on particular equalities, such as ethnicity, be explicit about this. We appreciate that there is no one size fits all when it comes to beneficiaries, as everyone you support with is an individual, but please use the space provided to describe your beneficiary needs and where you are best placed to meet them. Questions 3.1 and 3.2 are for numbers of beneficiaries and volunteers. If you have any volunteers, make sure you are consistent with your narrative. You will be asked to choose one primary beneficiary group. We appreciate that this may be difficult, as you may feel that your beneficiaries are aligned to a number of these groups. Please use the question below to expand on the beneficiaries your project is most aimed at. The next part of the question asks why you are focusing on this group and how you are best placed to do so organizationally. Make sure you cover how the project will benefit this group, why the project is needed, and how your organization are best placed to support them. Bring in evidence of why you are supporting these groups, including evidence from your own experience of working with them. Talk through your track record and previous feedback. This is very important. Bring in evidence, feedback, previous feedback from your beneficiaries. Very good answers will be clear on which groups you are targeting. It will fit in well with your application and make sense with what you want to deliver. They are able to articulate why the project is needed, the assessors, the benefits to the group, and the organization's own track record using evidence. Section 3.4 asks you to tell us if your project is supporting people of characteristics including ethnicity, age, religion, and so on. This section is not scored, but gives assessors a good idea of any particular equality groups that you are supporting, and this is taken into consideration at the panel. Over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Moyo. And I suppose just to elaborate, obviously you can see that for many of our questions, there will be similarities in answers, and kind of, it could be quite easy to duplicate, things you've already said. Don't feel that you need to do that. If you've already said something in a different part of your application, say who you're supporting, feel free to say, we've already mentioned that in this section. If you think that there's nothing else to say, if you've already covered it, you've already covered it. So the next thing I'm going to go into is budget, which is quite quick, but I thought it might be helpful just at this point in time to quickly share with you our application scoring criteria. This is what we've been going over, but just to draw your attention to the fact that some questions are weighted more heavily than others. And, what you might do as someone who's applying is focus more on questions that are weighted more heavily, or if you are time limited, and then focus less or spend less time on ones that are weighted less heavily. And I suppose even if you didn't do that, just acknowledging, having an understanding of the weighting just helps to see kind of how important we feel or assessors feel that knowing what that question is trying to say is to the overall application. So I'll jump back into our presentation. So section 4 is all about budget. Budget is a scored section, and in the section around budget, what we're looking to do is gain a comprehensive understanding of how the project looks financially. And I suppose just with this budget section, you know, what we're looking for is to bring financial clarity to the narrative, not necessarily to assess for value for money. A good budget will provide assessors with clarity around what you've said you'll do, and is the tool that we most often see helps assessors to fill in gaps. So, you know, to consider, you know, we have a calculator button. So these kind of calculated functions within the budget table in the application, it helps you to ensure your breakdowns are correct. And this is because previously in our grants program, you know, years ago, we would just ask people to upload a budget. And a lot of applications fell down really quickly on the fact that those budgets just didn't add up. And when you're an assessor and you're assessing 10 applications and 9 of them have a budget that adds up and 1 of them doesn't, it's very then easy and a very competitive process to, you know, kind of disqualify the one that just doesn't add up. And that's why we have we've embedded it within our form, and we've put those calculator buttons there to try and help organizations safeguard from that. If you start, you know, make sure that you don't introduce any new information into your budget. So this is really, really important because it really does confuse people. If you start talking about items in your budget that are not discussed anywhere else in your application, assessors will be really confused. For example, and this is an example that, you know, we have seen quite a few times, is if you've got a cost in your budget for 10 student laptops, but haven't mentioned anywhere else in your applications that you're providing laptops to people, that is going to be really confusing for an assessor. And if in doubt as to whether or not you should break down your budget items further, it just never helps to give more, it never hurts to give more clarity, but it can hurt not to. And so there's an example there around how you might break down salaries, you know, one with a little bit more information and one with a little bit less information. You can see that, you know, this one here, it does provide a lot more clarity, you know, to say, let's say in your narrative, you forgot to mention or you didn't mention that youth workers were working for 15 hours per week. Immediately, the assessor has that information from this budget. It's going to provide clarity. So in terms of how much can you apply for, we have created just this little bit in the application in this budget section to help you work out how much you can apply for. As a reminder, so for the project grants, for all of our grants, an organisation can't apply for a grant that's more than 50% of their annual income. So the calculator works that out for you. So if you put in your annual income, which say is £20,000, the budget calculator will tell you that the maximum amount you can apply for is £10,000. And all that's doing is just telling you how much we can consider from your specific organisation. So I guess from this, you can kind of take away that if your annual income is over £40,000 a year, you can apply for the full maximum amount. So in terms of how much funding you're requesting from the council, this is an important one to get right. As I said before, if you make an error here, it could be kind of costly. So if you're applying for 10,000, make sure you double check you put 10,000, not 1,000, not 10. And this is, yeah, just how much you're requesting. 4.2 is optional, and that is you only need to complete that if the total cost of your project is more than you're asking for us. So if your project costs £20,000, or say your project costs £50,000, and you're asking for us for £20,000, this is where you can say our project costs £50,000, and that can help to give clarity to your application, you know, and put that financial amount in proportion. So that's that budget table I was referring to before. Just make sure you complete all of it, and we've got a little bit in here that you can put from other sources. Enter the amount to the nearest pounds. Don't include decimal places. Round up. You know, we can definitely afford people to round up. And just again, make sure that if you put salaries in there, that they meet the London living wage, which did recently increase. And then at the bottom of the budget table, there are two sections with calculator items. These can calculate the sums you put in the table. And as I said, it's just to safeguard, you're putting in amounts that then don't add up. So if your budget, for example, doesn't add up to the amount that you're asking for, that's a bit difficult. So a very good answer in this section is really simple. Costs provided are thorough, they're detailed enough, and they're realistic based on the project information provided. The realistic part's quite important. People do sometimes put unrealistic costs in there, and it might just be that they don't really make sense. And we have, keep in mind, we have a lot of assessors from the VCS, from across the council. So we're kind of between all those people, there's a decent amount of knowledge around, roughly how much community services cost to deliver. Of course, it's different for every application, but just make sure that you're considering that and you're being realistic. If you have a really high or a really low cost for some reason, maybe your cost for delivering something is really low, because say you already have that, expertise in-house, say that. Similarly, if it's really high because you need to go and get specific expertise to help you deliver this item, say that too. That's only going to give more clarity and help an assessor say, oh, I see why that expense is a bit higher than I would have thought. That makes sense. And, just because it's higher doesn't mean that it constitutes poor value for money. We don't fund applications that are just the lowest amounts. That's not how our grant scheme works. Again, the budget expenses link clearly to the rest of the application. There's no new information, and just generally it enhances the overall clarity of the project ask. This is where you can put in funding from other sources. You don't have to, it's completely optional, but it can help give clarity. As I said before, if your project is £50,000 and you're applying for 20,000 from us, there's a £30,000 gap there. It can hurt your application not to say, we have 30,000 in reserves that we're going to use, or we have an application into these other funders. And if they fund us, we'll obviously have that 30,000. If they don't fund us, we'll fall back on our reserves. But you don't have to do that. It's just up to you. And then there's additional information. This section's not scored. It will take you less than 5 minutes. It's where you can put in your bank details, so your account name, your sort code, and your account number. And by doing this, what happens is if you're approved for your grant and you submit your grant contract back to us, we can pay you within 3 days. And so that's why we ask in this form, and it's much quicker than an invoicing system. Again, we have attachments. It's not scored, it's just where you upload everything. Just make sure when you are submitting, when you're on your application page, you'll see 2 buttons to upload. One is to attach the document, another is to click upload. A lot of people get hung up on that, so make sure when you have uploaded your document to your application, you've just ticked upload, and you'll see it change on the screen. And then the last section, I won't go into it because I can see we're a bit over time, is your declaration. And that's just you confirming that you are duly authorised to submit the application, and you are duly authorised to enter into conversations with us about funding this grant. Maureen, do you want to fly through what happens next? It's quite straightforward. So, I mean, I might suggest that maybe if anyone has any questions, we just answer them first, because we have gone a bit over time. Apologies.
Any questions before I fly over this? Thank you, Caitlin. Yes, I'll quickly go over this. We've mentioned this before. We always receive more applications than we are able to fund. Your application will undergo eligibility criteria and due diligence checks by the grants team. If It will then be assessed by volunteer assessors from the council and the voluntary community organizations. Volunteers are trained and are given guidance documents to support them to make fair assessment of your application using these scoring criteria mentioned. We have started, we are even recruiting volunteers over the coming weeks. We've started recruiting volunteers. So please do look out for information. Informations are out there, look for them. And if you are interested, please volunteer to be an assessor. New for this year is a clarifying questions. I think we did the same thing last year, which we allow you to ask any questions about anything unclear on your application before discussing them at panel. Which we allow us to ask. Make sure you respond to any request by the deadline. During the panel, assessors will discuss applications in comparison to each other, and we take into consideration issues such as equality, strategic objectives, and spread around the borough. We will always offer feedback to unsuccessful applicants and encourage you to think about this for future applications. Thank you. I won't go through everything, but there are other key, these on the screen are key documents and resources available to support you with your applications further. Our website is there, prospectus is online, guidance documents is there. You can contact other organizations and you can contact us if you have any questions.
I think there was just a question there from, I think, Hackney Council. Did you want to come in?
Yes, it's just a quick question. Is it possible for us to have those links emailed to us?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll email everyone a copy of the slides with an updated application timeline, and also a copy of this recording as well. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. If you have any questions, we can quickly answer them, please.
Yeah, come in, Danny.
Yeah, it's just a question about the statutory. You say you don't cover something that should be statutorily covered. This is an earlier slide. How loose is that? Because you could argue that most things are or should be covered in some way.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really kind of where there's a legal statutory function for something to occur, and because of that, it would be very difficult for a local organisation to deliver. I would say, if in doubt, just send us an email about specifically what it might be that you're referring to there, and then we'll be able to give like exact advice on what that is. And it might be just that that continues to be part of your project, but maybe not a part that we fund. But yeah, that's just a sticky legal one that doesn't really apply. It applies less than it applies more, I guess you could say.
Okay, thanks.
Well, if there is no questions, I mean, Moyo and I will stay on for the next couple of minutes in case you'd like to ask a question in a less public kind of setting. But thank you for coming. Apologies for going over. We'll make sure that we send all these documents to you. If you have any questions, throughout the application window, please email us, get in contact. Me, Tom, Moyo, or Sue will be there ready to reply. And yeah, if you do apply, best of luck with your application. I've popped in there the assessor role description. If you'd like to be a part of decision making in this round, you're more than welcome. The more community voices we have, the better. And it's no problem if you do submit an application. We manage those conflicts of interest, usually by potentially just putting you on a different fund. So if you applied in project grants, we would put you on an assessment panel for the children and young people's grants. Or if that wasn't possible, of course, you would just have to leave the room when your application is being discussed, or when any applications that may have some kind of crossover with your organisation are being discussed. But yeah, very much encouraged. And yeah, feel free to drop off, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Taylor, jump in.
Just quickly about start dates. As you know, some of the projects will be or will want to be funded only through this funding stream. As such, it seems that the notification of the decisions will be after a possible start date. So, am I right in thinking that they can start anytime so long as they are completed in that financial year? If they, for example, start in May the 1st or June the 1st, for the sake of argument. Just want a clarification.
Yeah, no, Taylor, absolutely. So you can start your project. So we'll fund that retrospectively from April. So let's say you don't find out until May, but you were continuing a project, then it wouldn't matter if you received our funding or not, you'd still do it. And that would be in April. We're happy to fund things kind of retrospectively to April. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. So in that financial year, so 2024 to 2025, it can start at any point there, and it can go, for 2 years. So it's totally up to you when you want to start, and it's totally up to you when you want to end. Just make sure the start is in that year period, and that it's a max of 24 months.
Okay, and just to follow up very quickly, the amount that can be applied, the 20,000, is that per year or for the entirety, whatever the length of the project is? Again, a clarification, if I may, please.
Of course, great question. So it's for the entirety of the project, yeah. So that could be for a project that runs over 12 months, or it could be for a project that runs over 24 months. But it can't be any more than £20,000. Yeah. Oh, I had something else I wanted to say there, but I've forgotten. Anyway, so I suppose the only other bit of information there is that we pay upfront. So if your project is delivered over a year, typically we'll just pay you in one installment. If it's delivered over 2 years, you'll get half of the payment in that Q1, and then you'll get half of the payment in Q4, so that you're paid up for, the kind of 2025, 2026 year. Awesome. Alrighty. Okay, great. Well, yeah. All right, Fab. Okay, well, take care, everyone.
I've got one question.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
One is just a confirmation. Well, I got two questions. One is just a confirmation question, which is, are you able to confirm my email address? Because I really want these contact details. And then,
should we confirm our email?
that you've got my that you got my email address.
To be able to send you the slides.
Yeah. I literally just put it in the chat box.
Okay. Alrighty, no worries. I'll take note of that. Did you sign up through Eventbrite?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it should be on there, but in any case, I'll make sure this is added in, so you might get 2 emails.
And then the other one, my organization, we're looking to apply for it to be a charitable organization, but it's separate from the normal traditional funding. It is foster carers. All foster carers come together, and we do get funded from the local authority already, but obviously, they never give much. And some of the activities that we want to do to help the carers and young people, especially during off terms, holidays, respite, I don't know if it's the same procedure to bid for funding for those as you would bid for the community. Because I look on the list of stuff and the criteria that you put, which is quite applicable, but there is certain things that we do which is just designated only to foster carers and young people, and not the wider community. So is there any specific template or anything for us to get some of those funding?
No. So our funding is much less structured than, say, if you're procuring or responding to specifications, or creating specifications for other processes within the council, and that is because this funding is aimed at community groups. So, we're not putting them through that kind of rigid process. So I think if I'm answering your question correctly, and if I'm not, let's clarify. You can just be really explicit in your application about what part of you can say we're already funded to deliver this. We're looking to enhance our services by adding these on, or properly funding these parts, and these are the specific parts that we want funding for. As long as you can kind of demonstrate how that aligns with our equality's objectives and our priorities, then there should really be there's no reason I can see that you wouldn't be able to do that, and why you would need a particular specification. What you can always do though in our process is upload things. So in our final page, there's a number of spaces that you can upload documents. And if you have something that you feel like gives more detail, or kind of is more along the lines of a specification, you're absolutely more than welcome to upload it.
Okay. You just popped something in my head here. I've got pretty much majority of the young people and that's in care is covered underneath the characteristics with their what they've been through, which is disability, and by definition, disability can also be trauma response. No, they don't. All these behavior affect their lives. So yes, that's quite helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just one thing to be aware of is what will probably be most important if you do put an application in to our grants is to be really specific about the funds you put in. So obviously we've got in our project grants, we have the generic project stream, which is the one we've been talking about today, which is just any kind of project that could be delivered in Hackney for those beneficiary groups. And then we have the children and young peoples. And if you frame an application to say that at the end of the day, your beneficiaries are young people, you've got to put that application in the children and young people stream.
Yes.
But if you say you framed this application as more, this is benefiting the carers, or this is benefiting the wider community, it might be then better to put it in this one. But just make sure that you're thinking like, who is that final beneficiary and which stream are we best placed to put it in? I think from practice, though, where we get an application that is like, say someone submitted a project grant application and it's clearly for young people, we'll just kind of put it over into the children and young people stream. But there's just a couple, I think there might be one or two additional questions in that one about children and young people. So I suppose in many ways you can't go wrong, but just think about that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
And if I can quickly add, if the young people are under 25, that is when you apply for the CYP. If they are young people, because at times up to 30 years old, I count them as young people, you can still put in for the project. And if you ask further questions, you can send us email if you are not clear, and then we'll look into it. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And that's the email that I can see on the slide right there.
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. You'll be able to get us there.
Okay, in fact, let me screenshot that right now. Am I allowed to screenshot?
Yeah, absolutely. But when we send these slides to you, we'll send it from that email. So you're more than welcome to just respond to that. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Okay, well, take care. All the best, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.